following is an ESPN special presentation.
I think Howard revolutionized sports broadcasting.
The record report that Joe Mann makes $90,000 a year. It's exactly slave wage. Howard, a well-paid slave, nonetheless a slave.
What was routine in a daily newspaper, which was criticism, semi-investigative type journalism, personal kind of column journalism, did not exist. He stopped sugarcoating everything. Also, he had an enormous memory. Howard could remember everything he ever read or seen.
2 days later, tragically, William Clayton died. He was the only facility officer who was killed in the takeover of the prison.
I thought that he was able to get to human stories that a lot of other people didn't get to. And I think athletes felt that he had an interest in them as human beings as opposed to just athletes.
As one fans the stands, looks at these people, one realizes what an athlete can come to mean to a population.
ESPN presents Outside the Lines. Howard Cosell, His Life and Times, with Robert Lipsyte.
I think the thing that when people really began to sit up and take notice of you
was the way that you began to bedevil poor Casey Stengel in ways that people hadn't really approached sports legends before.
Well, you used the word bedevil. Mm-hmm. I don't know why. I never thought I bedeviled Casey Stengel. I thought Casey Stengel bedeviled young people, and I couldn't bear it. I saw him take kids named Harkness and Burright, and he bedeviled them. He had a right to, I suppose, in a free society, broadly speaking, about freedom of speech.
You didn't like Casey Stengel?
No, because I thought he hurt young people needlessly. And I thought he propagandized himself.
And yet he was certainly a hero and an instant legend among the press.
Of course. He was a creation of the press. And he played to them very, very straightforwardly. I mean, my writers, my writers, my writers. That was the beginnings of my differences with the sports print medium, and I took it very seriously because I didn't want to see young people hurt. I've never made this public. Bing Devine knows that what I'm telling you is true. And he came to me one day and he said, "Howard, I think you can help me because my hands are tied. I can't be accused of, tampering." He said, "I want Gil Hodges to be my manager." Gil was with Washington at the time. And I spoke to Gil and asked him if he'd like to manage the Mets. And the answer was yes. And so,
Wait a minute. You're a sports reporter.
That's correct.
You entered into the industry. You tampered. You talked to Gil Hodges to ask if he wanted to become manager of the Mets. You were operating not as a reporter. Not only were you operating under the table for management, but you were trying to replace Casey Stengel, a legend, a beloved American hero, whom you personally disliked. How do you justify that?
Your words are so hypocritical. I went through this garbage with you when I brought you up to Yale to speak to my class.
I don't think we've
and you
discussed
talked
this
to me
before.
about
We've
ambivalence.
never discussed this before.
Of course we did. And you talked to me about ambivalence, and you accused me of ambivalence. And I said you had a point. Because, you see, I am unfortunately a human being, too, and I care about human beings. And the one thing I take from sports, and have always taken from sports, are human beings. And I will always consider myself a human being who has taken people from sports. Now, have I done things that are not consistent totally with what a pure journalist, if there is such a thing, is to be? I suppose I have deviated. I don't apologize for that. I did things that I believed in, that I believed were right. I believed it was right for Gil Hodges to manage the Mets. I believed it would help the Mets. I believed that he would become a very significant factor in their successes. And he did. I believed he was a fine man. I knew he was a fine man. I did not believe in Casey Stengel, which is totally irrelevant. I believe that Casey Stengel hurt young people, and I think that anybody with honesty knew that. And he hurt them and hurt them severely. But Casey Stengel's legend was built by people that I disrespected, people of the sports print medium, and I didn't think they were servicing the public properly in what they were doing. I happened to be a terribly, terribly bright man, and I knew the people I was dealing with.
You
and
also
I knew
are
I
a
was
terribly
doing...
arrogant man, and we're talking now about Cosell's law. You are above the law, and you're a lawyer yet.
Oh, that's garbage, and you know it. It's funny to hear you talk that way. There is a very good parallel today. I'll tell you what that parallel is. The parallel is Phil Pepe and Jack Lang, for instance, fighting desperately for their right to vote for Pete Rose to be in the Hall of Fame. It's a very apt parallel. They're concerned with their right to vote. That's interference with a private business. And I was an antidote to that. I don't apologize for it. I'm proud of it. Period.
30 years ago, when you were an antidote to this, were you a self-conscious antidote to this, or did you enter into a field whose rules you didn't know and adhere to? How did you see yourself?
How did I see myself? I saw myself as a person who wanted to bring to public attention that which I thought was wrong. Nothing more, no less than that. No great shakes about that. Never thought of myself as anything else but.
Did you think of that as that was going to be your ticket?
Oh, come on. That's sports writers' garbage. They pull that garbage. Don't you pull it.
Well, what do you say?
What do I say? I say I did the right things.
You always did the right things.
I did what I believed in, and I was unafraid.
ESPN's presentation of Outside the Lines, Howard Cosell, His Life and Times, is brought to you by Natural Light from Anheuser-Busch. Where there's good food and good times, it's only natural.
Your brother has this image of sitting in the stands at Ebbets Field with you as kids, and you were broadcasting the game. Do you remember that?
I remember being at Ebbets Field with my brother, sitting in the center field bleachers. They were in center field, and waiting for Delph Camilli to hit one where I was, and I would mock broadcast it, yeah.
Already then, you knew what you wanted to be.
No, I didn't know that I wanted to be a broadcaster then. I was just a kid having some fun.
Well, what was it growing up as a Jewish kid, the son of an immigrant in Brooklyn in the 20s and 30s? What did the Dodgers mean?
I suppose the Dodgers meant an identification for a, as I said, a city unto itself. You, where I lived, you could hear the roars of the crowd. You know immediately what was happening at the ballpark. You know it by the sounds. I remember a tiny man named Red Barber running down, get off the subway, get off at the Franklin Avenue subway, and he'd run down Franklin Avenue to Montgomery Street, and he'd turn in, and then he'd go to the marble rotunda, which is the symbol of Ebbets Field then. And Red was part and parcel of Ebbets Field.
Did you listen to him?
Oh, yeah, sure. I always listened to Red. I listened to Red when he was broadcasting out of Cincinnati. I'd get the Cincinnati station on my radio, and I'd listen to Red Barber. And then he came and joined the Dodgers.
Little Howie, sitting in the stands in Ebbets Field, what was the voice that he was using when he broadcast these games to his brother?
Nobody, just my own voice. My voice was supposed to, was not a broadcast voice. But when I did go into the industry, I found a way to make that voice usable. Not only usable, but identifiable, which was the key. And I made it work. I was very fortunate.
What was the key?
The key was the identifiability, the speech rhythm, the speech pattern, and it was as simple as that.
Well, sitting in the stands back then, were you a broadcaster already? I mean, in your mind, was that what you wanted to do, or did you want to be out there playing ball? What?
No, I wanted to do what my father wanted me to do. He wanted a son who would be a lawyer, and I meant everything to him. And his last words to me, or to my mother, please have Howard go back to the profession. He never wanted me to be a sports announcer.
And yet you defied him in a way. Why?
I didn't defy him. I had to make money. I had a lot of responsibilities then. I had to help take care of my mother, and I was able to make a lot of money in broadcast.
Well, was it just money?
Oh, I suppose it was a little bit more than money, because I found in broadcast something I could never find in law. This is an oft-told story. I found an immediacy of translation, of effort into result. And I had something that came to me naturally, was a reporter's instinct. And so I liked it in a manner in which I never liked the law, because the law is all preparation, Bob. That's what it is. If you're going to be a good lawyer, you've got to prepare your cases. You've got to prepare your cases in the law library. You've got to prepare your cases for the courtroom. It's all preparation, and it takes many, many weeks and many, many months. And I couldn't wait that long, as a matter of disposition. And that's the immediacy that I found that I wanted in terms of broadcast.
Howard, way before Howard was Howard, it was off I used to tape record fights. And this was Clay Liston, the Miami Beach fight. I guess it's '64. And Howard was doing the color on the radio broadcast. Jack Drees was the blow-by-blow, and Sonny Liston's not coming out. He kept screaming that, I'm going up there. I'm going up there. He kept doing that. And Ali was Ali and screaming and yelling, give me justice, give me. They both had higher pitched voices then. I'm the greatest of all time. I shocked the world. I shocked the world. Kept doing that. And Howard was talking to him, and I started fooling around with him then. And then he started doing more and more things on Wide World of Sports. And then he started apologizing for boxing on Wide World of Sports, and his voice got lower and lower. I'm sorry for this. This is a debacle. This is a sham. It should never be. What you're watching is not boxing, it's wrestling.
It was always interesting to me that, you know, when he first came on the scene as Cassius Clay, you kind of saw him as a charming loudmouth, a short timer.
Well, I used to be on locally, nightly. And the first time I had Ali on, he was back from Rome. He had won the gold. And he had just had a meeting with Harry Markson. And
then president of Madison Square Garden Boxing.
Yeah. But anyway, there's Ali sitting there with me. And I said, where you been? He says, oh, I'm just back from meeting with Mr. Markson and the garden and so on. I said, oh, yeah, about advances, money, you're going to fight for them. And then he suddenly looks at me and he says, you know an awful lot about this stuff, don't you? I said, well, I know an awful lot about who's running the garden, and I don't think you should be involved with that. He said, I ain't involved with no one. I ain't involved with no one. I said, I think the one you should listen to is Angelo Dundee, who's your trainer. And he says, what are you thinking, Dundee? I said, if I had a son who was a fighter, I wouldn't let anybody touch him but Dundee, because he knows where all the crooks are. And we hit it off very well together. And as he left me that day, he said, I like this. You're kind of with it. I said, you do what I tell you. You'll be all right. Stay away from those people. And we always did hit it off.
I'm confident I can whip all of them. This ain't nothing new. My image has been confident. What you trying to make it look like something new for? I'm always confident I can whip all of them. You're being extremely truculent. Whatever truculent means, if that's good, I'm there.
You remember Mike Minucci's The Restaurant on 52nd Street? I brought Ali there one day. And who's holding court at the bar? Vince Lombardi. And Lombardi turned down the draft. He's not an American. And now he's talking to Ali. And Ali is beguiling him. And now they go out the door together. And Ali starts walking up the street. And Lombardi says, you know, he could have been the greatest tight end ever played the game. He said, he's a hell of a guy.
Those years with Ali, certainly in television, you were the only voice that kept the story alive, the constitutional aspects of the story alive. Was that a problem? Was that a great cost?
With a percentage of the American public, yeah, it induced a great deal of violent hate mail, which affected me and affected my wife very adversely. But it was not a problem with the company because of Roone Arledge. Roone and I, as I have made plain through the years, had many differences. But in fairness to that man, I would not have survived and prospered without him. Whatever our differences, he's a brilliant man, and he stood by me.
Especially during the Ali time, I guess.
Exactly.
I mean, Howard Cosell did things that just took sheer guts or chutzpah. I remember one time at the height of of Ali's early fame, but when there was still a kind of a sinister quality to the black Muslims in the public's mind at that time. And we went up after one of the fights up to a hotel room on top of one of the hotels here. I don't remember which one it was. And we got off the elevator, and there were all these guards standing around, bodyguard types. And then we went into this room, and we were the only two white people in the room, and there must have been, I don't know, I would guess a couple hundred people, maybe not that many. But there was just a kind of a startled look, because in came these two people. And there was the room sort of quieted down, and there was this moment of imagined, I don't think it was real tension, but you kind of sensed there was a little tension. And Howard made a joke about something like, okay, everybody in this room who isn't white, out right now. And it broke the place up, and everybody laughed, and from that time on we had a terrific time, and we spent a lot of time with Ali and his people. And that was during the era when there was a lot of uptight racial tension, and not to mention Vietnam and all the rest of it. And so I think a lot of what Howard did took a kind of courage that it doesn't take necessarily to call a football game or explain why a play didn't work.
He leaves it all the way. Puts his head down. 80-yard touchdown. This is over. What a show this man has put on tonight.
What you have seen tonight, ladies and gentlemen, is a truly great football player.
How do you look at an event? How did you look at a football game on Monday night?
At a football game on Monday nights, I looked at it as an exercise in futility, because...
Oh, what?
As an exercise in futility.
Howard, millions of people listened to you on Monday Night Football, and you told us, you know, about individuals, you told us about dramas going on in the field, you told us about human beings playing. You didn't give us some exercise in futility. Okay. You gave us, you gave us weekly soap opera. How can you say this?
Oh, that's
you were
nonsense.
one of the main reasons that people watched that show at all.
Are you serious?
Of course I'm serious.
Oh, come on. Everybody knows the main reasons were Frank Gifford and Don Meredith.
I find your sarcasm bracing. However, the point was very clear that from, what was it, like, was it 71 to 83? What were those years? You know, how women, intellectuals, all sorts of people who needed a little more justification, you know, to watching this event were brought in by you. That this changed the viewing patterns of America, the living patterns of a country. Don't tell me some, I mean, at this remove, don't tell me some exercise in futility. I don't think that you would have been able to offer that kind of insight and entertainment and enjoyment if you were not getting something out of it yourself of the moment. You had to have been glad to be there then, right?
There were certain things that I did that I enjoyed doing. I knew that I was the right one to tell America that John Lennon had been assassinated. I've talked about it often with David Wolber, who was very dear to me, whom I grew up with. I knew I was right.
How did you know you were right?
Because I had had a very special relationship with John Lennon. I thought John Lennon was a genius. I knew of his impact upon the civilization of my time.
Let me hold that thought. Let me stop you there, because I think that what you're touching on is you also had a very special relationship with the 60s, the people who came to age and consciousness.
I think that's true.
In the 60s.
I think that's true.
In a sense
I've told you often I was right for my time.
Mm-hmm.
There's no question about it. Look at those times. The birth of the pill, the birth of the drug culture, the unending and unwanted war. You go on, and you reach the most ignominious moment in the history of my time. The shoot-down at Kent State. And I was curiously a part of all of that. And I was right for my time. And I sought desperately to convey those times to my listenership and to my viewership.
When Monday Night Football first started, I used to come into my office, literally there were boxes of mail of people saying, get that guy off. And it got up to, I believe Henry Ford called Leonard Goldenson and told him to get him off. And I mean, you just had to, in periods like that, you just had to stand behind him, because if you put too much pressure on Howard not to be himself, then you destroyed what he was.
Those years in the booth, were they good years? Was that fun?
Up to a point, and then it became a horror scene for Emmy and me.
Yeah. Well,
we had
describe the fun in the beginning. I mean, it seemed like you were having fun.
The fun was vanity.
The fun was vanity.
Yeah, I was on an ego trip. There's no question about it. I was the center of attention, and I knew my stuff. I knew how to communicate with the people. And on that very first day, September 21st, 1970, when it was the Jets losing to the Browns, 31-21, I just knew it was going to work.
You felt in control.
Yeah, I absolutely did. Look at the things we did in the booth during those years. Can you imagine uniting the true odd couple in Candlestick Park? John Lennon and Governor Ronald Reagan? That's an odd couple. But there they were in Candlestick Park. I'll never forget a guy who was a dear friend of mine, who was head of sales at ABC, Jim Duffy, getting furious with me because he wanted me at a sponsor's party before the game. And I was doing a piece with size 10, see, Bo Derek. And I said, I can't come, Jimmy. I'm doing this with Bo. He said, what the hell is Bo Derek? I said, you've got to come here to see it. And there's so many incidents. You call a mediocre player, and you're thrilling Gil Brandt and Tex Schramm while you're doing it. You're calling a mediocre player named Newsom, Robert Newsom. He's no Calvin Hill. They couldn't have agreed more. Your life is threatened. That's Texas, which is all of America. You've got to understand that. It's my life threatened. Calvin Hill was a great player.
When did it turn sour?
For me, it turned sour for me when Emmy said, it's enough already. I've worried enough about you, and she said, I really don't want it anymore. Whatever turned sour for my wife turned sour for me.
I'm sure that I've been critical of him and he's been critical of me, but I can't put a finger on that, except to say that Howard was very, very sensitive to what was written about him, extraordinarily sensitive for a man who was, capable of telling it like it is, as he said about you.
He should be the elder statesman of all sports people. He should be sought after for guest appearances constantly. He should be on selected programs that he feels like doing. He should have outlets that should be clamoring for him. And he has shut almost all of that off by his own actions. He also has alienated an awful lot of the people that he used to work with because of the various books that he's written, which some of which seem gratuitous. And you wonder why he goes out of his way to alienate people who he worked with. And I guess part of what made Howard the reporter that he has been and the personality is that he has a compulsion to say things that are on his mind. And if he gets a cause, sometimes they're great noble causes like Ali, and sometimes they're small little causes like proving that so-and-so is a phony or whatever. He approaches that with equal fervor.
How important was Arledge to your career?
Could not have happened without him. I realize that in retrospect. I needed him. Arledge, I bumped into Arledge on the street one day on 66th Street. He said, hey, we've got to get together. You're doing some very, very good work. I want to talk to you about it. I said, well, thank you very much. What is it you want to talk to me about? He said, well, you seem to be able to get every athlete in the world whenever you want them, and to get things out of them that nobody else can get. He said, I want to use that talent.
What was the talent? To see the story, to get them on the air?
See the story and get them, and to have their confidence, to have them believe in me, and in the fact that it's like Jim Brown wrote in his, to me, extraordinary current book. He wrote, Howard can be measured. Howard is a warrior. He can be measured by his enemies. They are the great and the powerful. And I could always get a fair and honest hearing with Howard every time I had a major problem in my life.
Do you like that characterization of yourself as a warrior?
I think so.
When I first met Howard and he was doing radio reporting, he was very impressive because, one, he was the only radio reporter who was really reporting. He was going out looking for stories. And there was no question in those days he worked hard. He still wasn't the most pleasing personality. He still liked to snub people and he liked to act arrogant. But at least he was a working reporter in a medium where there were very few working reporters. I think that changed over the years. Howard's sort of trademark of telling it like it is became really telling it like he thought it was.
You try to put together what made it successful. One of the most interesting things about Howard is that on the instances where he didn't have events as a backdrop, he was never terribly successful. Sports Beat wasn't successful, the variety show wasn't successful. I mean, there were some successful, I'm not suggesting that nothing was successful, but Howard at his best was providing this kind of edge as an adjunct to major events, Olympic Games, heavyweight championships, Monday night football games, things like that.
Well, not to simplify, he's almost a condiment.
Well, in a way, yeah. He's the garlic. I always said that. He's the garlic that makes the stew work.
I think Joe is hurt. Angie Dundee, Ali's trainer, right next to me, is saying it. You may hear him. Down goes Frasier! Down goes Frasier! Down goes Frasier!
Of all your finest hours, do you think in terms of being popular and right, well, the '72 Olympics in Munich, do you think that crystallized your career?
I was there in Munich. I lay on my belly. A relative stone's throw from building 31. I looked up and I saw those hooded faces. And I thought about a kid whose parents I still stay in touch with, named Aaron Berger, a wrestler from Shaker Heights. He was won the Munich 11. Never get over it as long as I live. Never get over lying there. How I even got in with Tony Triola, and I took Shirley Povich, Jim Murray, some others. I got us in as Puma shoe salesman, selling at the Puma shoe store. There I was lying there, 6.5 miles from Dachau. And finally, Arledge said to me, "Do you want to come in and go on the air?" I said, "No. No, Roone, I don't want to go on. I can't believe what's happened here." They said they killed 6 million of us. Now it's going to be 6,011,000. They'll never kill us all. So the next day, September 6th, Avery Brundage did his thing. I shot right to the radio headquarters, and I said, let the games go on. This was the ringing exhortation of a man named Avery Brundage. There was a time for Avery Brundage. It was the time of William of Orange. It caught on like wildfire all across the country.
That was telling it like it is.
That was telling it like it is.
When did that phrase appear?
That phrase, there was an issue of Variety magazine in show business. They were quoting a man named David Sonny, like in money, Werblin. It was at a point in time when the American Football League was making a shambles of the National Football League, a duly adjudicated illegal monopoly, unparalleled in the history of legal jurisprudence. And Sonny Werblin and Al Davis had combined to destroy the National Football League, only to be betrayed. And the headline was, Sonny Werblin tells it like it is. And that's where that came from.
You picked it up from that?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. It rang a bell.
It sure did.
1976, there were all those rumors that you were going to run for the U.S. Senate. Was it in your mind at one point?
Sure, I wanted to desperately. Hugh Carey will vouchsafe all of this. Then the governor of New York. He came up to talk to me, and in fact, I disclosed that he was up there and sitting in the boxing arena, and he said, my God, what you've done to me. I'm not supposed to be up here. I said, look, you're up here, and who the heck sent you up here? The head of the Democratic Party, Bob Strauss. He wants me to run for the Senate, and I said, I want to run for the Senate. And then Emmy said, oh, no way. You can't do this to me and to your daughters. That press will never stop. They'll never tell the truth, they'll never stop, and I can't endure this. And that's why I didn't run. It was as simple as that.
Was that a disappointment to you?
Yes, I've regretted that all my life. All my life. I had a recognition factor that was then unparalleled. Good Lord, I had just created Sugar Ray Leonard. It was 1976, the Olympics. Good Lord.
If you could go back, would you change that decision?
Yes, because I would have been elected. Nobody knew who Moynihan was. In fact, I got a letter from Senator Moynihan, whom I happen to like very much. He said, say it ain't so, Howie. That's all he said.
Mm-hmm. Do you think you would have had as much impact in politics as you did in sports?
That's hard to say. No, probably not. You know, I'd have been just another freshman senator. But I had a way. Mm-hmm. I had a way. And sometimes the quiet ones have the greatest impact.
Mm-hmm. Could you see him operating in the Senate?
Well, the Senate is a place of large egos, and he would fit right in.
So many nice things said about you. You have to really fight yourself inside to keep from believing what you hear.
What are your feelings towards Ali now?
Sadness. Mm-hmm. Terrible sadness. I was last with him at the Night of 100 Stars when I had to bring on all of the great stars. And I tell you, there was even in that night, though, there was joy, because I brought that man out. I brought that man out, and that crowd stood as one. And I said, this is the greatest of all champions. His name is Muhammad Ali. And just to see those people stand and cheer him, and knowing the state he was in physically, it made my heart sing. It was a wonderful, wonderful scene. And this on a night where, behind the scenes, one of the most steadfast men I've ever known in sports, Oscar Robertson, broke down as Ali was eating and the food was slithering down his chin, and he was being fed by Howard Bingham, his photographer and his old crony. And Oscar cried out, "Howard, good Lord, what have they done to this man?" And I knew exactly how he felt.
You know, when you talk about Ali, there's such affection in your voice. It makes me wonder, you know, that watching him fight, if you wouldn't flinch when he got hit, if you wouldn't grieve when he lost, if you wouldn't feel very sad at his ultimate decline.
I felt, no, I'll tell you when I felt badly. Was after the March 8, 1971 fight, the first fight against Frasier, when Ali went out with this horribly swollen jaw. He went past me, and our eyes met, and there was tenderness in me, and I felt deeply for Ali, and he knew it. He had gone past me, and Frasier won that fight.
You had begged Muhammad Ali not to fight Holmes. What did he say to you?
He oddly thought that he could somehow win. I believe he reached a point in his life where he really thought that, in spite of everything that had happened to him, he was, in the long run, invincible.
His coming back, his being beaten, his decline, how much did that have to do with your eventual disassociating yourself from professional boxing and then boxing entirely?
No, that's different. I was always concerned about the health and welfare of the men who fought for a living. And I began my crusade in 1972. The record is so clear. I went before a congressional committee in '72 and stated my position on boxing. I called for a federal sports commissioner or a federal sports commission, and there's nothing new, therefore, in my position. It's gone on for years.
Except that there is a long distance between reform, which is what you were calling for in the '70s, and abolition. I mean, this is
abolition grew with immediacy. I made up my mind on the spot. I realized there was no hope. Once again, the boxing writers, the sport. It happened Thanksgiving Day, not that many years ago, Thanksgiving weekend. Larry Holmes against Randy Tex Cobb. And it was awful. The people in the arena screaming, "Come on, Randy, you can take it. Come on, Randy, show them your toughness." And they're screaming with joy. And Larry Holmes, to his credit, he didn't want to kill the man. I am convinced that he laid back, and I was proud of him for it.
What was going on in your mind or your gut?
My gut? This is it. I don't want to see this anymore. No more, and I can't win. Sports writers took care of that, boy. They're right there. They're always on the wrong side of the fence, morally, ethically, in every way.
They called you a hypocrite as well for waiting so long.
Of course, of course.
Until you had made your millions, they said.
Until of course. Typical, par for the course. Just don't pay any attention to the record, to what I had done before the Congress, committee after committee, right down to the current governor of New Jersey, Jim Florio. We wrote a letter that we signed together demanding that it be abolished. Florio had worked closely. He had some guts. He had some real guts. He stood tall, and he fought like hell for government regulation.
He was a former boxer.
That's right. And I really respected Florio. But what could you do? You couldn't do anything.
You had different feelings about amateur boxing because you continued to cover that for another 2 years, perhaps.
Well, I had a commitment to cover the Olympics. And I'm sure glad I did those '84 Olympics.
It was a fascinating time. Vietnam, civil rights, youth against age. It was a dynamic, volatile time, and into the middle of this came this extraordinary person with an ability to articulate a lot of these issues, to ask tough questions, to show outrage, to show compassion or whatever. And I think we will not see a person like that in that setting for a long time. It was partly novelty to the public, and it was partly this combination of gifts that he had, which made him extraordinary.
What does it mean to be another Howard Cosell?
To fight. What is, you can summarize it in a sentence. What is popular is not always right. What is right is not always popular. That was the credo of Daniel Webster. He was right at a time when he couldn't safely walk out into the streets of this country. He was right then, and I'm right now.